Some think the greatest moments in United States history happened on a battlefield or in a grand political chamber. But actually, so often the moments that truly changed the course of this country, from its founding to the location of its capital to the tense-wrought moments that endured until the Union was preserved, these moments happened quietly in rooms across our nation, especially in our nation's capital, and they reverberate with us today. Hi, I'm Sharon Pratt, former mayor of Washington, D.C., and the founding director of the Institute of Politics, Policy, and History, whose mission is to rediscover and showcase the history of our nation's capital, a history that impacts the world today. There are so many fascinating and undertold stories that many of us don't know and are now rediscovering. That's why I hope you will join me in this new series, In the Room Where It Happened, where we explore the little-known events, meetings, and decisions that created who we are today. We begin with a story that forever changed our nation, the assassination of our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, the first president of the United States to be assassinated. You know, on August 14th, 1862, there was a meeting at the White House. Of all the structures in Washington, D.C., nothing quite equals the president's mansion that we call today the White House. And on this date, Abraham Lincoln invited, probably for the first time ever in the history of the country, Black leaders to come and work with him about a plan, an approach he had to life after emancipation. You know, Abraham Lincoln was an interesting man. We think of him as the great emancipator, and that he was ultimately. But it was a bit of a journey. When he stood for office as president, he always made it clear he was morally against slavery, but he was not an abolitionist. He was not going to do anything that would disturb the Union. He would not promote abolition. But ultimately, the war happened anyway. And so after a point, especially with the prodding of many such as Frederick Douglass, he came to appreciate that he had to make ending slavery a focal point of this war. It could not just be a regional battle between the North and an industrial economy and the South an agricultural economy. At the core of it, it really was about the institution of slavery. And so Abraham Lincoln used his war powers, that's how he could do it, to bring about emancipation. He could deny those who rebelled against the Union the assets of enslaved people. So he began with emancipation in Washington, D.C., and that continued to emancipation for all of the rebel states in 1863. But the question for him, and for many, I'm sad to say, in America, was how would these newly emancipated blacks exist in a society of whites? So he thought, well, two just can't coexist. So he came up with the idea of having emancipated blacks immigrated to another country, to maybe Liberia or Panama or even Haiti. So when Frederick Douglass heard of this, he was so irate. He publicly rebuked Lincoln with an article in the North Star. His contempt for Negroes and his canting hypocrisy is what Frederick Douglass said. This took Lincoln aback. So he decided he would have a conversation with black thought leaders. Well, I'm pretty certain it was the first time this had ever happened. And so he invited them to the White House, probably in the Oval Office, on August 14th, 1862. Overwhelmingly, these civic and religious leaders were not in favor of this. Since 1619, people of African descent have been in America. Nobody knew what any home country might be. The home country was America. And so he had difficulty trying to get this group on board. But a few did explore it, and it proved to be such a disaster. It was a source of an embarrassment to Lincoln and for the country. That is how it all began, and that's how the first time you ever had Black thought leaders in that room where this happened.